What is up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another top 10 anime of selected year. Yes, I've been going back in time each and every single year and giving my top 10 anime of each one of them. And now we're on to 2016, which I have to honestly say was a very difficult one for me to fill out the list for. There was a couple that I'm like, this is for sure in my top 10, but yes, as I started getting lower and lower in the list, it became more difficult to find out who's just not going to barely make the list. My long list for honorable mentions is 15, so that tells you how bad 2016 was for me to make, but I made it. I'm going to stick with it, and I'm going to go through it. Before I do want to note that there is some titles that will not be in this list, basically because I've already covered them. So yes, Shogun Roku Rakugo Shinju, Iron-Blooded Orphans, and yes, March Comes in Like a Lion, I've already covered. I've already given them a year award. I also want to note that I'm not including any movies, even though we had Your Name, A Silent Voice, In This Corner of the World, and Kizumonogatari Volume 1 come out. They're still phenomenal, and I acknowledge them fully. As per usual, I want to welcome everybody to go down in the comments down below and let me know what your top 10 most favorite anime of the year is. If you can't make 10, that's fine. Top 3, whatever you can give me. I love hearing back from you guys. Top lists are typically a great way for people to kind of get ideas for really fantastic shows. So if anybody out there is looking for great shows and they've watched all that I've listed here, and they want to check the comments, they can get some good picks there as well. So with all that said, let's jump into my top 10 anime of the year 2016. Starting off with number 10, we have Snow White with the Red Hair Season 2. This show is absolutely phenomenal. I kind of assumed it was in a shoujo realm where it's basically a female main character that's kind of in a world with a lot of, pretty boys and stuff, but that's really not the focus. Typically, whenever I get these kind of reverse harem type shows, you usually have like this very dumb as bricks character that's the main character, and they're kind of just being strung around by these pretty boys. But that was not Snow White with the Red Hair. That was definitely not this show. It essentially opens up with a girl named Shiroyuki, who's very beautiful. She works at this shop, and at some point, she catches the attention of this really nasty guy, this prince. And it kind of forces her to have to kind of revolt and flee from the country itself, and then she ends up running into Zen, who is a prince of a nearby country. And thankfully, Zen kind of brings her in, and she's able to become sort of a court herbalist. And what kind of blossoms from this is that she's able to do what she wants to do, the thing that she enjoys. She has a little bit of a comfort there, but at the same time, you have this growing bond between both Zen and Shiroyuki. And it's a very nice, subtle romance that's sort of building over time, while at the same time, yes, seeing Shiroyuki really seek out the thing that she enjoys doing. I was very excited when this got a second season, and honestly, into the second season, it just gets better and better as it goes along. Ultimately breaking my heart that it never got a third season, but I really do love this series. I love the characters. They have such great depth to them. And again, the romance is really solid. So yes, Snow White with Red Hair, highly recommend it. Jumping into my number 9, I have Flying Witch. This show was absolutely special. It kind of falls in that realm of sort of a very laid-back slice of life, but technically has a fantasy element added to it, and very Iyashike, very relaxing and very healing type of show. It just feels like one of those shows that you kind of get lost in. You just relax and you just get absorbed in the world and you just enjoy the time with the characters, which, yes, all these characters are really fantastic. It kind of opens up with this girl named Makoto, who's 15 years old, who's trained to be a witch. And at some point, she goes and lives with a distant family. And while she's there, obviously, she's introducing this family to the wonders of a witch. So it's kind of interesting, the idea that it's a normal world like ours, but there is a magical element to it that people aren't shocked by, but it's just an element that's there. There's a subtle mysticism around it, and us to this family is sort of introduced to the magic of this world through Makoto. And like I said, it's never trying to be bombastic and crazy and loud. It's just a very laid back, almost out in the sticks sort of location, just enjoying the wonders of magic. Like I mentioned before, if you're looking for a show that's very laid back, very Iyashike, very healing and relaxing, definitely check out Flying Witch. It's a very beautiful show. Moving on to my number 8. This one might stir up a couple people. Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress. I actually really love this show. Yes, it's by the director and the studio behind Attack on Titan. A lot of people joked at the time it was Attack on Zombies instead of Attack on Titans. It has the feel there. Yes, you have this kind of jet gear and everything, so it feels very much so like Attack on Titan, but it's all kind of centered around these people trying to move from one location to another in these trains, while at the same time avoiding the threat of zombies that is around them. And yes, like I said, I really love this show. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of character in here that I really enjoyed. And yes, Mume is amazing. Mume is absolutely amazing. It was something that at the time, I don't think it had enough traction because unfortunately it was stuck on Amazon Prime at the time. This is right when Amazon was just getting into seasonal anime. And so a lot of people kind of missed the show. Yes, I'll agree with a lot of people that the moment that Biba shows up, the show just kind of gets rough, but at the same time, it doesn't take away from the rest of the show. I remember when we were watching this show, every single week, me and my brother would watch from the very beginning each time a new episode was added. So episode 1, then 1 and 2, and then 1, 2, and 3. And we just had a lot of fun. It was like looking into the sheer nature of Ikoma and his frustration with the people discarding him, that whole thing about the fears that people have of the Cabaneri themselves. It's just really good. And yes, it has some really incredible action pieces that was in as well. So I highly recommend, if you're looking for a cool action-y type of show, zombies and all that kind of stuff, look no further than Cabaneri the Iron Fortress. It's just an excellent series. Continuing on with my controversial picks, we have number 7, which is Erased. Yes, I loved Erased. And I think it was a lot to do with how I came into the show, the perspective that I took coming into it. Because honestly, at some point, I didn't really care about the who's the bad guy element, which, yes, is an element that is throughout the entire series. This idea of who is harming these children, and this character going back into time to hopefully stop these kidnappings and these killings of children in the area when he was a kid. And yes, like I said, there is a mystery. Who is the one that's doing it? But again, I think it's so obvious that people got so focused on that, hoping that some weird twist would happen. And you know what? I wasn't focused on that. What I was focused on was the human element. I was focused on Satoru, the main character, and his desire to help people around him, and seeing the terrible things that happened to Kaio and how he wants to help Kaio from the abuse of her family. It was just that human element, that's what I attached to. Again, the breakfast scene, which I think is one of the best moments in anime ever. That breakfast scene just killed me. It was just so heartwarming and so tearful. I loved those moments. The whole aspect of what the mom does later on in the series, I thought it was just so heartwarming and so impactful. That's the stuff that I loved, and I think it delivered that very well. And on top of that, I think the director behind this series did a phenomenal job. Enough that I went out and got the Blu-rays. Despite my own issues with how sort of anticlimactic the ending is, I still loved every single episode up to that point. It was just such a beautiful series, again, that had heart in it that I really did cherish. But yes, like I tell most people, just don't go into expecting some mystery. Just go into it for the human element that's in there that I think is just the treasure. Moving on to my number 6, I have Ushio and Tora, the new version, the 2016 or 2015 version of Ushio and Tora. Gosh, this show was so fantastic, and I don't know why it couldn't have been this good. Like, it's crazy that it was this good. A new adaptation of something that was previously adapted of an older manga, and gosh, it was just so good. Like, it's so good. It essentially opens up with this guy named Ushio, and at some point he finds a spear that is impaling this demon. He pulls the spear, which releases the demon, and the two of them kind of work side by side, even though they hate each other, because Ushio is carrying the only spear that can hold down this demon. At the same time that this demon needs to work alongside him. It's just a team up that should never be, and they're kind of taking down the bad guys. But what was so excellent about the show is, like, even though it's an older series, they captured the style. Like, they captured that old style of a shonen, and at the same time upgrading it to be a lot more visually pleasing to a newer audience. And every single story that it got into was fantastic, and everything ultimately culminated to this bigger picture that happens later on in the series. This is one of the very few shows where when you get to the end, you have the big bad, and it was dreadful. Like, this is one of the very few, like, last boss characters that I thought was truly well portrayed. Like, there was a sense of dread with what they were facing at the very end, and how it fed off that dread was just so well portrayed. And again, it was so massive hype. Like, by the end of the show, it was like, I had so much hype going into that last fight that it was a testament to the storytelling and how they portrayed everything up until that point. Again, everything's sort of for a purpose. And especially with a lot of the backstory stuff they get into, it was just, again, I don't understand how this is so good. I don't understand how this is so good. But I highly recommend Ushio and Tora. Definitely jump into this new series. Don't worry about watching the old anime adaptation. Just jump right in the new one. It's excellent. And yes, hamburgers. For my number 5, I have Sound Euphonium Season 2. Yes, I loved Sound Euphonium Season 2, which is super funny because I didn't care too much for the season 1. I as much as I love Kyoto Animation, I think the art, the beautiful art, and the directing and the attention to detail that the first season had, I acknowledge all of that. Just didn't care for the first season, like the storytelling and the characters and everything. It wasn't until season 2 that I was absolutely sold on the Sound Euphonium franchise. I thought the character writing just took a step up. All the characters they introduced and they got into just took a step up. Everything completely subverted my expectations for this series overall, just because, again, coming out of the first season, I wasn't too hot on this entire franchise. But again, season 2 just took these characters to a whole nother level. Just Asuka. It's just Asuka. Asuka alone is enough reason for me to absolutely love the second season. I just think it did a great job and it makes me very excited for what's to come in the series. So for those who don't know, it's essentially a bunch of characters that join a band at their school, and they of course have to train a lot and go to competitions. And of course, there's a lot of drama between the characters, the previous years, the new years, all that kind of stuff. And honestly, if you've watched the first season and you weren't a big fan of it, I highly suggest checking out the second season. Maybe it'll change your mind on it like it did me. For my number 4, I have Natsume's Book of Friends, or Natsume Yojincho Go. This is the 5th season of Natsume's Book of Friends, and this is one of those shows where no matter how many seasons I get, I still love it, and it gets better and better with every single season. It already had a season beyond this, and I think I just completely overlooked it. But yeah, I highly suggest checking out Natsume's Book of Friends if you have not yet. You don't have to watch the whole thing, just check out the first season, see if it's something you enjoy, because I think of all of the yokai type of shows, there's a lot of yokai shows, and it's typically a chunk of them are around solving issues around the yokai, helping them out so they can pass on or whatever. But it sort of takes it from a different perspective in the idea that you essentially have this main character, Natsume, and they have this Natsume's Book of Friends, which is this book that his grandmother had. And in this book, she basically put the names of these yokai into it, tricked them into giving them their names, and she would put it in this book. And so the problem that Natsume now has in our current times is that he's being chased after by all these yokai that want the book. The book, the name of a yokai gives you power over them. And so obviously, plenty of people would want this book so they can then control the yokai. And so it's up to him to sort of find these yokai and give their names back. At the same time, he's getting a story told to them. That story about when his grandmother ran into these yokai and took their names from them, tricked them into giving their names. And then again, in the very end, typically he'll give the name back. And it's each of these individual stories that have so much impact behind them. There's so many of these episodes just wrecked me. Like, they're so good. I love every single one of them. And again, it seems like every single season that we get was just better and better stories being told. It's almost like this writer's just getting better and better at their craft. And I hope that we get more. I would love to get a Blu-ray release to this one. I think it was one of the series that was NIS America, and so they had them like super expensive each release. But I would love to own this series. It's too good. But yeah, I highly suggest Natsume's Book of Friends. And yes, Natsume's Book of Friends Go, or Season 5, is my number 4. Moving on to my number 3, I have Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash. Yes, this series was really good. I really, really love this series a lot. This is one of those ones where every single week I was just waiting for it to come on. And there's multiple reasons for that. I sort of describe Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash as a very slice-of-life isekai. Like a very grounded, gritty, slice-of-life isekai. And why I say that is because, yes, it is a story about a bunch of characters get transported to a fantasy world. But the twist is that they don't know anything about their previous life. They don't even know if they were in a modern time. Then the only indication that we get is that one of the characters at some point was carving a plane, and he didn't know what it was. So it's these characters that don't really have any past attachment, but they know they're not supposed to be in this world. But the cool thing that came out of it was really more around the aspect that it felt very grounded. It was more so about them going there, forming a party, having to join a guild so they can make money to be able to survive and eat. And then they go out to fight, and they're terrible. They're not overpowered main characters. They're struggling as a group to take down just measly goblins. It's that kind of gritty, very grounded setting. And again, not overpowered main character type of story. Again, it's more about their daily lives and just getting money to survive. And yes, later on, getting into the mistakes that you can make and the cost of those mistakes. And I think it did that really, really well. Enough that I went out and got the entire light novel series at the time, just because this is kind of a series that I want to read more into. I just know there's going to be so much more in there that I think is going to be really good. And yes, on top of that, visually was absolutely fantastic. They went almost like a watercolor type of look, and I think it looked phenomenal. And yes, having music by No Name, which yes, some people argue they played their music way too much, but I felt like it set some ambience. And I always love vocals in my audio for my series. But yes, if you're looking for a more gritty, grounded, not overpowered main character isekai, definitely check Grimgar Fantasy and Ash. It was absolutely a fantastic series. And yes, the only isekai that could possibly overdo Grimgar Fantasy and Ash for me, yes, was ReZero. My number 2 is ReZero, Starting Life in Another World. I honestly struggled. There was a side of me that wanted to put Grimgar above ReZero, but I can't deny how much I got absorbed into the world of ReZero. This is an isekai that, yes, character goes into another world, but the twist that was in with this isekai is that, yes, the main character Subaru, whenever he dies, he sort of resets time back to like a checkpoint. He doesn't know when those checkpoints get set. He just knows that he can redo things over and over again. even though he doesn't want to, because yes, dying hurts. Dying hurts. It's typically he's trying to overcome a situation and then he ends up finding himself getting killed some other way. But what really got me into the series, and honestly is something that drugged me into the following season, is that I love the world. Like, this world has so much stuff going into it. You have almost like the 7 deadly sins witches, you have the cults, you have the kingdom itself, the princess. There's supposed to be some sort of selection process for a princess, which we never got into. There's so much going on in this world. Like, it feels like a breathing world that just has so many things going on that I really want to know more about. And as it gets further and further in the series, it just seems like every character they introduce, I grab onto. I love every time they get into a character, even a character I despised in the first season, Beetlejuice. It's so fascinating finally getting into him. Like, every character just has so much going on in the background and what makes them who they are. And again, with all the mystery around the world itself and the cults and the groups and stuff, I'm super fascinated by it. I cannot recommend the series enough. And yes, I know that a lot of people had struggles with the first season. It was really around Subaru. He's just over the top, kind of dumb sometimes. He's not the most likable main character, but I honestly love the exploration that the writer's doing with him. Having a character experience something with somebody, and then him dying and resetting, and then try to do something different, only to find themselves becoming suspicious to that person. So even though he's gone through so much with one person, just by doing something differently, they suddenly become the enemy of them. And that feeling that everybody's after you, I think they pulled off really well. I love getting into Subaru's head and his slow descent into madness that he kind of experiences at some point. It was one of the initial drawing points that I had, despite the fact that most people hated him. Even though, yes, he chose wrong with Rem. But no, I highly recommend ReZero if you've not, I don't know, anybody that's currently watching anime that has not watched ReZero, but definitely recommend checking it out. And finally, my number one, yes, the only thing that can top Grimgar and ReZero as the best isekai of the year, easily Konosuba. Konosuba is absolutely phenomenal. I cannot express enough. This show, the characters, everything is way too funny. For those that don't know what it is, it's basically Kazuma is this guy that dies in his previous life because some very unfortunate accident with a tractor. The goddess makes fun of him and says that he can go to this new world with anything that he wants. And so to get back at her, he decides to say, I want you as a goddess to come with me to this other world. He goes there and over time basically puts together a group of the worst adventurers ever together, and just shenanigans happens. So you have, again, this useless goddess that's always with them, that all she could do is this fan trick that she has with fountains of water. You have Megaman, who's just, her only spell that she has is explosion, and it takes too long to cast, and it completely drains her of mana. And then you have Darkness, who just likes being hurt because she's a knight. It's just a group of doofuses. The comedy's just absolute gold. I love the whole purification of the lake, stealing Chris's Ponsu. Like, the first season was just perfection. Like, I had my issues with the second season. I didn't laugh as much in the second season, but this first season was perfection. Like, it was just, it goes up there as I think my top favorite comedy of all time. It's just that good. And yes, comedy subjective, it worked for me. For me, it worked, and it was fantastic, and it's a perfect show. 10 out of 10. Go watch it. And it's so great that we got another season coming, and we have a Mega Man season coming, so it seems like the world is agreement that we just need more and more Konosuba. And that's it. That's my top 10 anime of 2016. For my honorable mentions, I have Haven't You Heard I'm Sakamoto. Was super surprised how much I enjoy this series. Like, every single episode, despite the fact that it's kind of the same joke, it pulls it off every time. And I don't know how it did it, but it did it. Additionally, we had Please Tell Me at Gakko-chan, which again was another fantastic comedy during 2016. Unfortunate things around the mangaka, but still, the show was absolutely hilarious. And some of the skits they had was just way too good. Ajin, Demi-Human, I really, really enjoy that series. Again, it was by Polygon Pictures, so it's full CGI, but it was a really cool world, and I really did love the main villain. The main villain was just so good. And yes, they pulled off some really fantastic scenes with the adaptation, with like the aspect that all the demi-humans are sort of unkillable, but they can put them to sleep. So yes, if you get shot by tranquilizer, gotta cut off a limb. It gets super crazy with a lot of the action scenes. Durarara, I really love as well. It's honestly one of the ones that I was really tempted to put in my top 10 list. But honestly, with Ketsu, I don't know, there was something about that series that kind of fell off a little bit for me. I also enjoyed Heavy Object. I thought it was a really fantastic kind of how do the foot soldiers of the battlefield take down these massive mechas. It's that kind of aspect, which I thought was really, really cool. Unfortunately, yes, it had some lulling points. That's why it didn't end up in my list. And then, yes, New Game. New Game's fantastic. I really love New Game. Just cute girls making video games, work life, more adult work life type of show, which we don't really typically get too much of. And that's my short list. I also had Luck and Logic, Bubuki Bronchi, Tanaka-kun is always listless, Real Life, The Art Club Has a Problem, Occultic 9, Flip Flappers, and Magical Girl Raising Project. I'm gonna stop. It's just too many good shows in 2016, but I hope you guys enjoyed my list as always. If you did, make sure to hit that like button down below. Comment, again, let me know what your favorite anime of 2016 was. I'd love to hear from you guys. Additionally, if you're new to the channel and you like this content, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you get all my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Just if you want to support the channel more, we have a Patreon link, a tips link, and a super thanks button down below. Greatly appreciate everybody that does, and y'all take care.